welcome to Taking the Myth, your topical, sceptical discussion show. I'm Stephen Knight, and joining me is Iram Ramzanatron. Iram, how are you?
Yeah, I'm alright. How are you?
Good. Fully vaccinated now. Well, not fully vaccinated.
Fully microchipped.
Yeah, I'm half microchipped.
You're half microchipped.
I've had the first jab early for my age range. I'm 37, so I mean, I think projections, I think it was something like August, maybe later for my age range. I'm not sure, but they got me in early, and all my friends of the same age have been called in now. So it seems like we're way ahead in certain areas of projected vaccination dates, and I believe you're soon to get Bill Gates-ed shortly, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I wasn't expecting mine till July at the earliest. But by the time this goes out, I will be, fully Robocopped, I think.
How are you feeling about it?
Laser vision. I mean, I'm expecting a bit of a reaction, I think, because I've already had COVID and I still have antibodies from that. And I know there are a lot of people wondering how long antibodies last when you have COVID, whether they last a few months, whether you even have any left. And 6-7 months on, I still have them. So I would have happily have waited to have my
So what is okay. So is the concern that you're topping up on top of what you've already got naturally in your system? Because you had the COVID, didn't you? You had the Rona.
Exactly. I had the Rona.
See, I don't know if any of this is medically sound, this assumption that if you have antibodies and add to it. Is this actually a documented thing, do you know of?
What, that you have antibodies?
No, that if you have antibodies, then have the injection, you could get worse side
there
effects.
was research. Because they're saying, and anecdotally speaking, I know people who have had the jab after getting COVID and they've felt really ill because obviously your body recognizes the illness, doesn't it? So it knows what's coming. So that's why you have that strong response to it. And, my landlady, because she had COVID as well, she got her vaccine I think maybe 2-3 months after having it. So she was quite ill for nearly a week. She said she felt flu-like symptoms. And when she got her second vaccine, it was the same. She was just, she could barely move.
Well, I mean, I'm not scared of needles. I like heroin, which is always the way. But I like to travel. Every time I go Mexico or Wales, I have to have a jab. Not Wales, made that up. Shouldn't have said that. Get in trouble. But I'm used to having injections for this and that. When I've been traveling, and it's never bothered me.
Yeah, so have I. But I had it when I went to Pakistan. I think is it hepatitis B you have to get checked out for over there. I mean, that doesn't bother me. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against getting vaccines or anything because I've had them done before, and. The only reason I'm getting this done is because I just know if we go anywhere, they'll ask us for proof of vaccines. I know for us, from what I can tell, the vaccine is safe. Everyone I know who's been eligible has not had a problem really. I know one person who had adverse side effects. He seems okay now, but that seems to be a bit of a freak one-off case.
Right.
Everyone else seemed to be fine. No, the only reason why I said I'm happy to wait a bit longer is only because I've had COVID, and when I checked last week, I still had antibodies, which means I should still have some protection from it. I know people say, but you shouldn't assume that because you've had it, you have antibodies, and also that you can't get it again. But, it's very rare that you can get it again. And, it's been 6-7 months. I've not had it from what I can tell. And I've been absolutely fine. And I am pretty much a Robocop now as well. So, yeah, I'll be Superwoman in a few days.
Excellent. So, yeah, I mean, I went along. It did feel like an event, and it was all very quick. I was there before, it wasn't planned. It wasn't in the calendar to have it done. It was literally come down, get it done on the same day. And the woman's technique was a bit strange. I don't know if she recognised me from somewhere or done something to piss her off before.
She listens to TTM.
Maybe, but she fucking like it was a bam, like proper jab, like put the jab in jab. I always wondered why it was called a jab. I think I know. And but that was fine. It was over as soon as it had begun, and I was fine for the first 24 hours. Now the next day, I had like the sorest left arm you could imagine. Driving, like getting into second gear was excruciating. When driving for some reason. And then in the evening, I had a really awful night's sleep, kind of feeling a bit rough and under the weather. And then the next day I was fine. So within 48 hours, everything was good and I can't really complain. So, if we can be absolutely critical of our government and how they've handled this pandemic, and obviously we probably got good reasons to. I know you're not entirely impressed with them. We've had some revelations via Dominic Cummings this week, but I think in terms of the vaccination programme, that's something certainly to put in the plus ledger for government.
Well, I think, many people would agree with you. That's why the Conservatives are still polling very high with voters, and Labour are, plugging way behind. There was this party many moons ago called the Labour Party, maybe before you were born.
Well, actually, that's a nice segue into something I want to get your opinion on, because Jeremy Corbyn, the second coming, Magic Grandpa, the proper boy. There's been some discussion, and there's a few ethical considerations surrounding this about whether or not Jeremy Corbyn has had the vaccine. Now, he's north of 70. He's in his 80s. He may be. I'll check that.
That's 71.
71, is he? Okay, so he's well...
So he's definitely well eligible.
Well eligible, yeah. So he would have been eligible for that right at the start or close to the start. Now, in his defence, he has urged his constituents in Islington to get the jab back in February. I think he put a video out there. But in the age of MPs posting videos of them getting vaccinated or saying they've been vaccinated, showing some leadership essentially to the rest of the UK, he's remained strangely quiet. He's also refused any press inquiries at his office as to whether or not he's been vaccinated. Now, I'd first like to say, I don't think you should hound public citizens. I don't think you should hound anyone, in fact, as to whether they've been vaccinated. It's a medical issue. It's a personal choice. You can make the argument it does affect the population, but I'm not going to badger people about it. Personal choice. I'm all for that. However, if you're a leader and you were potentially going to be the next Prime Minister at one point, presiding over a vaccination rollout plan, and you're somebody who doesn't have vaccinations or doesn't believe that in their efficacy. I know his brother's a bit of a crank on these things. Jeremy Corbyn has come out against Big Pharma. Where are you on this idea of whether or not we should ask Corbyn about his vaccination history?
Well, I was reading on the Guido Fawkes site that apparently people have told him that he hasn't had his vaccine dose.
Oh. So
I don't know if that's true, obviously, and he hasn't commented on it. And when he is asked about it, he says that, his office said, he doesn't comment on health matters. And I don't see why he has to pose with a vaccine, because I'm really bored of seeing politicians, whipping off their shirt, revealing man boobs or a carpet chest, and showing that they're getting the vaccine. I don't really want to see that. But I guess, on the other hand, it's there to reassure the public it's safe, there's nothing to worry about. You should all be getting it, urge everyone to get it. And, if you're a responsible person in the public eye, then, that's
but also
what's expected of you.
His constituency of Islington has had one of the lowest uptakes of the vaccine. So it might be helpful if their elected leadership said, I've had the vaccination and it's safe and you should too. There may be
I wonder if he has had it then. I wonder if he's had it because, as you said, his brother is a crank, and I wonder if he has similar views. I don't know if he does, but it would make sense.
It's interesting. I think it is a valid line of inquiry from our press to ask elected officials whether or not they've had the vaccination. I think it's fair. I don't think he has to answer, but I think the fact that he's not answered certainly indicative of something. But we shall see. We're still talking about Jeremy Corbyn, aren't we? He lives on.
We are. He's a nobody now.
Okay, so there's a lot to talk about, and I suppose we might as well get the easy one out of the way to start with. The one that we could wrap up in 5 minutes and guaranteed not to annoy anyone is the fact that Israel and the Palestinians have been going at each other again. which seems to happen every several years. Nothing else gets resolved except every other nation outside of that particular part of the Middle East seems to lose their head about it. Where are you? Free Palestine?
I am actually. I am very much free Palestine. I do believe in a two-state solution.
Yeah.
It was just very shocking to see some of the scenes several weeks ago when there was fighting at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in East Jerusalem, and that's what escalated things further. I mean, whether you're religious or not, just seeing Israeli soldiers storm a mosque which is deemed one of the holiest sites for Muslims is just is incredible. And then obviously Hamas responded to that with rockets, and thankfully their rockets don't really kill that many people because of Israel's Iron Dome thingy-majiggy.
Yeah,
it's quite impressive.
Stops about 80 to 90%, doesn't it? But I think it's difficult, this one, because I suppose for people looking out, they'll say, well, you've got this mighty super military power in Israel that can cause so much carnage and damage versus people who are firing rockets indiscriminately in the hope that one might slip through. And although people do die in Israel because of it, although it does have an adverse effect, like you say, the majority of them are stopped via this Iron Dome, which is an amazing piece of military technology. However, I think people sometimes fail to realise that if they were living in similar circumstances where a neighbour was just firing rockets at them constantly, I mean, we're talking thousands of rockets here, they would want their military to respond somehow. And it's not just like these people are sat in cafes as rockets fly over. They're packed into air raid shelters every time this happens. It causes a lot of disruption. And I suppose if you're a sovereign state with a military defence, that is intolerable. You do have to respond. And I suppose the argument is how to respond and how to minimise casualties, whether or not their response is disproportionate. And it seems to me like the viewpoint on this is so polarised that you have to be either 100% behind Israel or 100% behind the Palestinians. And I feel like there is room not to sit on the fence. I think Israel, deserves the right to exist, deserves the right to defend itself, but I also feel we should be very watchful as to whether or not they are disproportionate in their response. But it just seems to drive the far left and many of our Islamic population absolutely nuts every time this kicks off, to the point where we see convoys driving from Bradford all the way to London so they can, career down Jewish streets and shout about raping Jewish daughters and brandishing Palestine flags, and just this weird sort of a sinister show of aggression and strength in order to intimidate and inflame. I can't get my head around why this is a massive issue outside of where it's contained in this tiny spot of the Middle East. Do you have a better grasp on why so many people are invested in this conflict?
Well, because it's been a conflict that's been going on for 70 odd years, and unfortunately there is some, it does involve religion as well. It's not the main driver, but you do have, this is a land that is supposed to be holy to the three Abrahamic faiths. So naturally anything that happens there is going to provoke a very strong reaction from many people. Some people might say, well, it doesn't really bother us, why should we? But, I think it is quite sad to see what's happening there. I think, you don't have to. I mean, I think most people would agree that now that we have a Jewish state, now that we have the state of Israel, it does deserve the right to exist and it should be able to defend themselves. But, at the same time, at what cost? And it seems to be coming at the cost of a Palestinian state. And unfortunately, what you have is under the leadership of Benjamin Netanyahu's clinging on to power only because once he's out of office, he'll probably be jailed for corruption. Under his party, they don't really seem to be supportive of a two-state solution. They seem to be doing everything possible to make it, impossible. That Israel still occupies the West Bank.
Can Israel offer anything that Hamas would accept, though? Because it also seems like Hamas is completely hell-bent on the eradication of Israel at any cost. I can't see...
Well, they both are.
I can't see Hamas stepping up for a two-state solution either. So it just seems like a hopeless situation. And my opinion...
Likud, if you look at Likud's founding charter, Netanyahu's party, the charter does state between the sea and Jordan, there will only be Israeli sovereignty. So, and then you have Hamas on the other side that's actually calling for the obliteration of Jews. So how can there be any sort of compromise? I think the international community has also failed as well. You still have Israel occupying the West Bank, which is done since 1967. It's not doing anything to stop illegal settlements. So how can you have a Palestinian state when it's being undermined by all these settlements? You have Gaza that's blockaded by Israel and Egypt as well. What hope is there for any of these people to have an independent state? I understand, obviously, that as Israel has to defend itself, especially from the likes of Hamas, which want to obliterate them. But, at the same time, there's a wider debate to be had here about how Israel sees its future. Is it only going to be... is it going to be a Jewish state, a state only for Jews? And what does that mean then for its citizens?
They already do have Arab citizens that are eligible for the vote.
They do have Arab citizens and they do have rights, but at the same time, they are discriminated against. A lot of Arab Israelis will tell you how they're often discriminated against in Israel. If the demographics change, what's going to happen? If the Arab population inside Israel starts to grow, what's going to happen to the Jewish state? Will it still be a state for Jews? And this is a question that the late Christopher Hitchens once asked as well, because he was very, very in favor of a Palestinian state as well, although he did maintain the right of Israel to defend itself. But you have to wonder what its future is going to be. But now Israel's managed to normalize diplomatic relations with Arab countries now, the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco. So I wonder if those countries will be able to use any leverage on Israel to improve its relations with the Palestinians as well.
Yeah, it's a messy political, ethno-religious fucking clusterfuck, really, and this will happen again in the future, and it's a cycle that will keep repeating. And I suppose my chief concern really is not this conflict thousands of miles away, but it's how it spills out everywhere else.
Oh, absolutely. Like we've seen over the last few weeks, lots of school children in secondary schools protesting, waving Palestinian flags. We've also seen those, absolute nasty pieces of work driving down all the way from Bradford to London just to shout, offensive stuff to Jewish people. And you think, first of all, what an absolute waste of petrol. I mean, we really came all the way down. I mean, I'm all up for a road trip, don't get me wrong. But, calling for people to be raped and attacked, yeah, I'm going to give that one a miss. Thank you very much. But you're right, it does spill over here as well. And unfortunately, people really can't differentiate between Israel and just normal Jewish people who, let's face it, a lot of them are probably very critical of Israel themselves.
Yeah.
I bet they don't support Israel's policies,
The mask
even if
slips.
they do support a Jewish state.
I mean, this Israel-Palestine conflict is instructive insofar as that it helps a lot of masks slip over here, and people do trip themselves up differentiating between Israel and Jews. And
why else would you go all the way to Golders Green, Jewish area, to talk about Israel?
This idea that British Jews in London should be quizzed, questioned and held to account for the actions of the state of Israel, to me, is unbelievably anti-Semitic, and they can't quite see it. And, it's funny because these two extremes playing off each other here. You have the ultra-right conservative Islamists who just hate Jews, let's be honest. They're incredibly tribal because they see this as an Islamic thing. So that you have that in one corner. Then you have the ultra-far left who see the state of Israel as some sort of colonialist superpower, America 2.0 kind of thing, and they want a piece of it because of that. And they have anti-Semitism bubbling under what they say, but it's not as overt. I don't, if you were to ask them, do you hate Jews? They would say, of course they don't, but they still make all the same anti-Semitic tropes and pitfalls and conflations. So they're anti-Semitic most of the time, but don't realise they are. And these two extremes are feeding each other to the point where what percentage of Jews are in this country? It's a small minority, fewer Jews than Muslims.
Definitely less than 1%.
Exactly, and even the majority of those will not be very religious. We're not talking about Orthodox or Hasidic Jews. And if you look at the top of any hate crime data in most of the Western world, you'll find Jews right at the top of it in terms of anti-Semitic hate crimes. And this is even before these conflicts flare up. Yet they control
the media, innit?
But I mean, for a group of people that strangely control all the media, it's very strange that we don't hear about anti-Semitism all over the news 24/7 in the same way we do hear about structural racism against black people
or Islamophobia.
So that they're not control the media better, please, Jews.
But what's interesting? Every time there's a terrorist attack, a lot of Muslims will come out and say, "Oh, why are we being blamed? Why do we have to apologise? Why are we being held to account for something that's not our fault?" And that's a fair question. But then these same people are going around into Jewish areas and demanding answers from them and saying, "Oh, you must explain this." Well, you don't like it when you're held responsible for Islamist terrorist attacks. So why is it that you're demanding the same of Jewish people for Israel? I don't understand why people can't be very sensible about this. You can condemn Hamas and you can condemn Netanyahu or the Likud party or what the Israeli army does without having to actually be racist or anti-Semitic or defend terrorism. It really isn't that hard.
Yeah, I mean...
Is it?
Did you see that there's a Muslim YouTuber, his name escapes me.
It's not Muhammed Hijab, is it?
Not him, not that lunatic.
He's a knob.
He's a big fella, by the way. I don't know if you've ever met him in person, but he's quite a large
I wouldn't
chap.
want to get in a fight with it.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I will stare... If there's anyone my size or a little bit bigger, I'll take my chances. I'm happy to stand my ground. If he ever decides he wants to hurt me, I am running. He's a big chap. I think I stood next to him a few times in Speaker's Corner in London, a few other events he turns up. But yeah, he's a lunatic. But I'm not talking about him, though. There's another guy who's in Birmingham, and I don't know what his output is. I don't know what his content is. But I think Muhammed...
It's not Mufti Abu Layth, is it? The one whose house got
That's the gentleman.
trashed.
Yeah, and that... I don't know if you saw the footage of that, but that was terrifying. Now, what led to that was, I think Mohammed Hijab had spread some false information about his views on the Israel-Palestine conflict. And a car of Muslim thugs turned up, absolutely smashed the shit out of the front of his house, kicked their way in, filmed it all, was happy to upload this, and terrified this man and his wife, and I think possibly a child in the house at the same time. And I'm just thinking, like, what sort of way can you be a Muslim and push back against some of the excesses of this when you see things like that? So it's a very depressing situation now where there are people... I mean, I suppose the ironic thing is I'm probably being too praiseworthy. He didn't even say the things that were attributed to him anyway. So just the mere rumour of somebody not being 100% pro-Palestine or 100% anti-Israel was enough for a convoy of thugs to turn up and smash the shit out of his house and intimidate him with violence. Yeah, it's horrible. So I hope they catch the people responsible for that. But I don't know if you've got anything to add on these conflicts, because I think we've pretty much solved it. I think if we can...
We have. I think we brought peace to the Middle East now.
Yeah, if we can get this podcast in the ears of Netanyahu and Hamas, I think real progress will be made.
Spread hummus, not hate. Oh, I could kill for some hummus.
Fucking love hummus.
I had some amazing hummus last night, by the way.
You're gonna hate this, but yeah. I
don't tell me you had some like shitty beetroot hummus or some crappy...
But I mean, I like to sample hummus at every opportunity, far and wide, even when I've travelled, and still, Tesco's own 70p does it for me.
Oh my God, you're such a Philistine. Oh my God. I've got to, one day I'm going to make some hummus for you.
Yes.
I'll make some hummus, support the cause.
Why not?
So I will give you that. And after that, you won't be able to go back to Tesco's finest, you absolute amateur.
All right, I'm going to hold you to this. What have we got next? I mean, it might be worth updating on the Batley Grammar School investigation.
Well, we've discussed this before. It's something that really, really wound us up. So not that long ago in Batley, Yorkshire, a teacher apparently showed a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad to pupils in a classroom. And as you can expect, that led to a lot of outrage, lots of parents, and I'm guessing lots of non-parents, people who didn't have anything to do with the school, went outside the school and protested outside. So this was in, I think, March, roughly. People gathered outside, demanded the resignation of the teacher involved. The head teacher, Gary Kibble, he apologised following the incident for the use of what he described as a quote-unquote totally inappropriate image during the religious studies lesson, and said it should not have been used. And following that, the teacher and his family had to go into hiding. There were reports apparently that there was a gang of young men who were waiting outside, trying to open the door, looking through the letterbox and the windows to see if anybody was inside, just waiting for him, basically. Since that time, more detail has emerged, and apparently it turns out that, that cartoon was shown before in other lessons, and he wasn't the only teacher to have used it. It was part of the curriculum. And
so he's done his job.
Did he show that
he had to go into hiding for doing his job?
Yeah, he did, but he didn't. There were some people saying, "Oh, but did he have to show it? Could he not have given a warning because this was sensitive material?" And I agree with you. I think when it comes to school children, you do have to do your due diligence and just be a little bit careful. But apparently he did. He did say, "Look, this is going to be quite offensive to a lot of people, so you do have the option to leave and not look at it," which is fair enough. He did that. Still, some people weren't happy, and I don't know, some kid must have gone home and told their parents, and hey presto. And so since then, there was an inquiry that was done into the context of how these 13, 14-year-olds at the school were shown.
So they're not kids, are they? I mean, we're talking teenagers here, young adults.
Yeah, I know. I mean, to be honest, I can see why people would be offended.
Yeah.
I know it's I know we're living in the UK, it's a free country, but I do, you do have to think about the context here, and you have to realize, yes, some people are going to be offended by it. And if this was just some thug on the street who was just chanting horrible stuff, or if he's just going around waving it in someone's face and saying nasty things, yeah, I can see why that would be offensive and hurtful for people. But this was done in a lesson. This was done in a lesson, and from what I've read, in a very quite a professional and decent way, and this is supposed to be an RE class where you should be having these debates.
Yeah, it's a controlled, safe environment, really, isn't it? I can't believe I'm using the words controlled, safe environment in regards to a cartoon, but here we are.
But the investigation concluded that he hadn't done anything wrong. After all that, he concluded, yeah, he's not done anything wrong. He can come back to the school, which if I was him, I wouldn't bother now, because that teacher is just going to be hounded constantly. I don't think he's going to be able to work there safely anymore.
I mean, this must be hell. I mean, this thing happened in March. He had to go into hiding due to credible threats to his life. They had this huge investigation, which has only just been concluded Thursday, I think, in May. So between March and May, this guy's been in hiding in fear of his life. And the investigation's concluded and told us what all right-minded people already thought, that he hasn't done anything wrong. However, concessions have still been made, haven't they? The school has said that they will give him his job back, which I think you quite rightly said probably want to pass on that, pal. But they've also said they will no longer show this piece of material in the class. So this campaign won, really, didn't it? This kicking up a fuss, turning up outside schools like thuggish mobs, sending teachers into hiding, this show of theocratic strength did work for them. They got rewarded at the end of the day.
Exactly. The investigation also said that, the topic could have been addressed in other ways and without using the image, and it wasn't necessary for staff to use the material. So it's a bit of a wishy-washy, kind of report, really. I kind of knew this would happen, really. It's just not surprising. And we've seen this happen before in Birmingham and East London, where, you basically a policy has been in place for a while, and then somebody, some activist in the community finds out about it and decides to whip up a mob and think, well, it's not enough for just me to be offended. I want to make sure everybody's offended, and to, turn this into a massive drama. And you think, this could have been resolved more quietly and more effectively. If somebody had a problem with it, a parent, they could have just gone to the school and said, look, I'm really concerned about this. It's quite offensive for me and my child. This is our religion, blah, blah, blah. Can we have a proper discussion about this? There would have been no issue, a parent to go to a school and talk about what their children are learning. But, shouting outside of school, intimidating children. I mean, classes had to go remote for a while as well because of that. So, children suffered.
We're giving in to these people. I mean, I must say, the National Secular Society, of which I'm a member, have been unwavering in their support of this teacher and challenging the outcome of the official investigation. They've been petitioning on his behalf with the school and the relevant people. Stephen Evans, who runs the National Secular Society, they seem one of the few organisations to me who have not yet drank the woke Kool-Aid, to put it as nice as I can. Now, that doesn't mean they're right-wing or anti-woke. They're sort of neutral in the middle. Their remit and their focus is secularism and the individual and, freedom from religion, which includes, more than anything, really, freedom of expression, and they're staunch advocates of that. So they're a very inclusive organisation, but they've not been infected with this sort of divisive identity politics, unlike many of our American equivalents, unfortunately. I think the National Humanist Association, I think it's the Humanist UK now, isn't it, rather? They came out in support of the teacher. I think they put one article out. I didn't see much else from them. I would have liked to have seen a bit more show.
Yeah, the teaching unions were very, very quiet as well.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the same unions who are very quick to come out when schools had to open. Oh, they had their fingers on the pulse.
We have to do some work.
We have to. Our members will be unsafe in the classroom.
But
when you've got an actual, and it's quite ironic they're talking about safety, considering how this teacher was hounded and his life was literally under threat, and yet you're saying nothing.
Well,
seriously,
shout out to the Batley Binmen Massive, because I don't know if you saw the show of solidarity from the local refuse operatives. How PC did I get then? A load of bin men turned up and supported the cause, which was nice to see. It's nice to see some local people take an interest and notice how important this is. I think the Labour leader of Batley was campaigning and couldn't get a quote out of her on this issue at all. So it's just incredible that... No, I mean, this is what annoys me. So I expect that if you poke the hornet's nest, and by hornet's nest I mean conservative Islam, you will get a reaction. That doesn't surprise me at all, really. What surprises me is the complete abandonment of wider society, of the individuals caught in the crosshairs. That really winds me up, because it wouldn't necessarily be a problem that these people got offended by a cartoon if everybody else just said fuck off, which is what they should be doing, but they don't. We go, like you say, the teachers union, the fucking teachers union, it's absolutely nothing. Zip. It's
just a joke.
Nada.
Joke. You've got a teacher here whose life was literally, at risk, and where, I mean, maybe we're being unfair. Maybe they were supporting him behind the scenes. I don't know, but when you've got a mob outside of school, you really have to take a firm stand and say something.
Well, if you think these things deserve pushback and you appreciate and value organisations willing to do it, I'd consider joining the National Secular Society, because they've been absolute champions on this issue. Luckily, it's good to see. What should we talk about next? I suppose we could talk about Sasha Johnson, and obviously we have to be very careful about what we do say, as this is now a live criminal investigation. Someone's been arrested. But I'll read the headline from The Guardian, if you're happy to work through this topic, that is.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I'm happy for you to read The Guardian, but okay.
That's fair.
You must read from the groin.
Yeah, I think it's just... nobody can accuse me of using right-wing propaganda if I go to The Guardian.
That's true. If you quote from the Mail,
So, teenager in court charged with conspiracy to murder Sasha Johnson. Now, Sasha Johnson is a prominent figure in the Black Lives Matter movement in the UK. I think she was in charge of the Oxford division of it at one point. I don't think she's part of that organisation or fronts that organisation anymore.
I don't know. But she did address crowds at their protests last year, I think in Hyde Park.
Yeah, she's very much for defund the police rhetoric. She's a very obnoxious individual. I've seen various video clips of her saying quite inflammatory things, challenging people almost to a physical confrontation, things like that. There were some tweets attributed to her on Twitter which might not be her words. I think someone might have stitched her up. She's certainly contested a few things, so I won't repeat them here. But unfortunately, it was reported that she was shot in the head. She'd been shot in the head. Now, this hit the news that Black Lives Matter activist or activist for racial injustice had been shot in the head, and obviously that sent many people into a flurry of excitement, because here we have somebody who's black and has been a victim of crime, and therefore the only possible motive and explanation can be white supremacy, and that's the only thing. Nothing bad that happens to a black person can be normal or average. It has to be because they're black. That seems to be the status we have. Now, it turns out, or rather the information we have so far due to the arrests and the reports from the police, suggests that this was a shooting that had nothing to do with skin colour, certainly nothing to do with her as an individual or her activism. She was sort of caught in the crossfire of a potential gang dispute, and the suspects that have been arrested were actually black themselves. But that's not before the lies had got the pants on and done a lap of the universe. So,
oh God, Diane Abbott, who astonishingly is still an MP. She claimed that she'd been attacked because she stood up for racial injustice. Even after the Met Police said there's no evidence that she'd been targeted, and they said basically that there's nothing to suggest she was the victim of a target attack. We're not aware of any other reports of threats made against her prior to this. So I guess that's what we've got to go on for now.
Yeah, I'll just read. Can I just read that Diane Abbott tweet just so we know exactly what she said? So Diane Abbott, Labour MP. This is another thing that frustrates me, because she gets so much wrong all the time. She happens to be black herself. So every time you point out what a complete nightmare she is on everything, we're told that we're only picking on her because she's black, which it's like, if you want me to give you a list of politicians that I think are useless and pointless, I've got a long list, and the majority of them will not be black, believe me. But she tweeted out right in the aftermath of this reported shooting, and I quote, "Black activist Sasha Johnson in hospital in critical condition after sustaining a gunshot wound to the head. Nobody should have to potentially pay for their life because they stood up for racial justice." So she's essentially saying that this woman was shot because of what she stood for, which is so essentially you're saying she was shot because she was black. That's what the reading is on this tweet, and that's such an inflammatory, divisive, dangerous, ill-informed thing to tweet right in the middle of this, to politicise it immediately. This young woman who's a mother, I believe, has been shot in the head, and the strangest thing to see after this was that she didn't cancel any media appearances she had. She leant straight into them, and when she was quizzed on it, completely doubled down and shared words to the effect of, it's wrong to challenge a black person when they're speaking about racial injustice. So, I'm black, therefore I don't have to apologise or take back the misinformation I was spreading. What is Diane Abbott? That's my question. What is Diane Abbott?
An idiot?
There you go.
Sorry, no, I can't say that.
Why is Diane Abbott? That's another question.
I mean, it says a lot that, her and Jeremy Corbyn were bezies.
I think they may have been more than that at one point.
Mental image.
Yeah, sorry about that.
God.
So I'm
feeling very queasy.
I don't know about you, but on the issue of, so if we had this reality where people were being shot in the head because they were black or fighting for racial justice, or, people in America were being killed just because they were black by the police, I'd be all over that, because that'd be a horrendous injustice. That'd be a terrible thing to endure, and I couldn't stand by and let that happen without me vocally opposing it every opportunity I got. Just so happens the facts don't support any of that. So, I mean, this is... I said this on a podcast. I interviewed Calvin Robinson the other day, and we often hear this phrase about gaslighting from the left, and I actually feel like I'm being gaslit on this issue of BLM and people like George Floyd at the moment, because I was saying that George Floyd's become this big poster boy and martyr for racial injustice. And first of all, there is no evidence or reason to believe he was killed because he was black. I mean, it's bad enough. I mean, I don't even need that fact. The fact that he was murdered the way he was outrageous, and I'm glad that police officer's been convicted of murder. But he's used as a poster boy for racial injustice, or BLM, and that's why many of our footballers are still kneeling before matches. Also, a year after he's been killed, cities and towns in the UK are lighting up monuments in his memory. This is a man who has got violent convictions against his name. He's not a saint. He didn't die for a cause. He was unjustly murdered. So
he was. I mean, I think it's worth pointing out that, he did have convictions, but apparently he did try and turn his life around.
None of them convictions. So the second you are in police custody, them convictions don't matter. They should have. They had the duty of care and respect of life to get him in the back of that car, still breathing, obviously, and he did not deserve what happened to him.
Well, you are right. I mean, this does tend to happen with certain issues, doesn't it? It just takes. It's like with Sarah Everard, that young woman whose body was found.
Oh, is that the police officer has been arrested?
One who was killed. Yeah, she was, apparently killed by a police officer. And as soon as it emerged that she'd been killed, that's it. Overnight, it just became one sort of big internet sensation. Women were coming out talking about how they felt unsafe, why London streets aren't safe for women, what men need to do. And, everyone decided to come out with their own experience. Like, I remember once going out on the street and someone making a weird face at me. And you think, sorry, I'm sorry somebody called you the C word that one time. That's not pleasant. But how on earth is that in any way comparable to being abducted and then killed?
Yeah.
It's not the same. and people started making this all about themselves. And I think this sort of something similar happened with George Floyd. He's become this poster boy for something which I don't know if he would have even supported if he were alive today. Maybe he would have. Maybe he would have stood up for some of the things that Black Lives Matter have been talking about. But this, we do see this happening when one case seems to get a lot of attention, whether it be Sarah Everard, George Floyd, or whatever else, and people just jump on this bandwagon and talk about all sorts of... They conflate a lot of issues.
Yeah, I think...
that might not even be related. So like with Sarah Everard, they started talking about other things, about how women felt
like domestic
unsafe.
violence came up
domestic
as well.
violence, yeah. What else was that? That was that movie Promising Young Woman, starring Carey Mulligan. That's the whole post-Me Too thing. You had women talking about how post-Me Too, how, some man had gently brushed my knee that one time. I don't even know if he even did it. There was a hint of that brushingness, and you think,
yeah,
how is that the same as some Hollywood director or producer rather actually raping aspiring actresses? So many of these issues get conflated, and
it's people using big dramatic current events to funnel in their esoteric political viewpoints, isn't it? So if we can capitalize on the murder of George Floyd to push our, we live in a white supremacist society, all police are bastards kind of thing, then we'll do it. If we can push our agenda that we live in a patriarchal, misogynist society by jumping on the back of that poor woman who was murdered, then we'll do that too. I mean, it got a bit crazy when she was killed. We had politicians suggesting a curfew for men to make the streets safer. I don't know if you saw Davina.
I would support that.
Well, I mean,
you know what? I would support that because, I'm only being facetious here, but it is interesting. It would be interesting to see how the streets would be if men were all indoors and it would just be women allowed out.
Yeah, you'd have no nice men to fight off the evil men who wouldn't take any notice of curfews. But I get it, because I am someone who's fairly sympathetic to the idea of the female experience, walking alone, the threat of male strangers, things like that. I also think on the flip side of the coin, if anyone's likely to be murdered in the street, it's probably a man. Women being slaughtered in the street is very rare.
You are right, but the thing is, with a woman, you get that extra threat of being sexually assaulted, which men don't have to worry about. But you're right. If as a man, you have to worry about being violently attacked as well. So it's not just women who will feel unsafe; it's men too. And all these people going around saying, oh God, it was so cringeworthy seeing these men saying, what can I do as a man, to help you feel safe? I'm a male feminist. Whatever, mate. Stop trying to get laid, okay? You're not... I see through you.
If a personality is too much effort, become a male feminist. That's my advice to people.
But, as you said, most... decent people will do the right thing, and no matter how much education there is, and you always get that after an event, we must educate people. You would think that everyone pretty much knows not to attack somebody, not to rape someone, not to follow a woman home. You think that's kind of common sense. People know what's right and wrong and what not to do. You're still going to get in every society a bunch of degenerates who will be violent or commit crimes, and it doesn't matter how much education they've had, they'll still do it. So I don't see I don't get the need for all these platitudes. And coming back to George Floyd, I've had all these analytical pieces 1 year on, what have we learned, what more needs to be done. And I think the whole debate we should have been having about George Floyd would have been about police training. Maybe that should have been the right way to go about it. Are police trained properly? Have they had adequate training? Who on earth thought putting the knee on someone's neck was a good idea? So that should have been really the topic of the topic of conversation. That not, so how many black people do you have on your board? I don't see how the two are related. I mean, maybe maybe there is obviously a discussion to be had about black and minority ethnic representation in companies, what people are doing for quote unquote diversity.
Oh, you can't,
hate that word, but for lack of a better word, let's just say, there's a lot of, we can have this discussion, but they're not the same thing.
It's funny you should mention this, and just on a light-hearted note, this idea to push diversity everywhere, and I'm for inclusion. Inclusion's massively important. I wouldn't want to work for a company or be part of a structure that wasn't inclusive. The idea that you shut the door on certain people because of who they are, to me, is insane. It goes against everything I believe in. But if you're sort of forcing diversity, this form of positive discrimination, or trying to, if you think that outcomes should perfectly line up with demographics, you're not thinking clearly. Now, an example of this is, so I love my movies, Iram. I don't know if you know that about me, but I do love a movie. And the fact that we've been coming out of lockdown and things have been eased has given me an opportunity to go and see a film. Now, there's a cinema house in Manchester, which I'm quite fond of. They show reruns. You'd love this, actually. They show reruns of 80s and 90s classics. It's a bar, and it's attached to a cinema. You have a few drinks and you go in. So there was 6 of us. I was in a party of 6 people. We were excited to see a 90s classic. So we get in the cinema house. There's 6 of us in there, which is my party, and there's 2 strangers at the front. So there was 8 people in total in this cinema room to watch this film, which is great for me. I like an empty cinema. So the film starts, and there's subtitles on the film. It's an English language film. So the subtitles come on this film, and the organiser who runs the place actually sat at the back of the screening room, and I assume this is a mistake, because it's a 4K Blu-ray disc they put on. It's not projected. The subtitles aren't hard coded, so I assume sometimes they come on by default and it's a mistake. So I wander over to him and I say, "Oh, sorry, fella, I don't know if you noticed, but the subtitles are on the film." And he said, "Yeah, we're a cinema that supports accessibility." And I went, "Oh, okay, that's great." I said, "Has anyone requested them though?" He said, "Well, no." So we have 8 people who have paid to watch a film. None of them have requested subtitles, and he's put them on. Now, it ruined the film for my 6 people, because I don't know if you ever watch things with subtitles on, but if you're watching something with subtitles on, I have to read them. My eye is drawn to them. It's text on a screen. Yeah. So I'm not watching the film, I'm reading the film. And there's a couple of people in my party who hadn't seen the film, and any of the jokes or dramatic beats were completely ruined because they appear on the screen way before the character even utters them. So for the sake of some sort of virtue signal towards accessibility or inclusion, an experience was ruined for the majority, for a minority of people that weren't even fucking present. Should I be annoyed about this, or am I just getting old?
Actually, what's interesting is, did the subtitles contain offensive words, or were they bleeped out?
No, there was some profane language throughout the movie,
and the subtitles reflected. Yeah,
they weren't censored or anything. It's just weird that it's a choice. I mean, so first of all, if I'd have said to him, "Has anyone requested subtitles?" and he'd gone, "Yes, actually, someone's asked if we can," I would, "Oh yeah, great." End of discussion, because someone wants subtitles. Why would I want to deny them the ability to enjoy a film? It's just the fact that they were put on as default so that he could say, "Look, we're all for accessibility," just sort of dampened the experience, ruined the experience for most of the people who were there who didn't need them, if that makes sense.
I get you.
Yeah. I'm going to cut this out. I mean, this is one long whinge about something completely irrelevant.
I mean, it does make you sound like a twat, but no, keep it in. Keep it in. Speaking of 80s movies, though, I watched 2 recently.
Tell.
I think RoboCop really gave me the feel for it. So I watched The Accused.
The Accused?
The Accused.
I don't even think I've seen that. I think you've out-ated me.
I don't think I have quite.
Yeah, I've not seen that.
It was.
Is this the Jodie Foster film?
It's a Jodie Foster film about a gang rape, and oh my god, it is. If you've not seen it, it's quite graphic.
Oh right.
Towards the end, but it's absolutely brilliant. Brilliant movie. I don't know if that would get made now, but that was fantastic. And then I also watched Raising Arizona.
Yes, okay, now I'm
it's so good.
Nicolas Cage, Coen Brothers movie. classic. I might have to watch that again myself. See, I might have to give you a list of 80s films.
And Broadcast News. Broadcast News. I don't know if you've seen that, but that's good.
No, I haven't. See that?
It's basically about this. It's basically about this television producer, and she sort of gets into this love triangle, basically between a gifted reporter and then this handsome young presenter who joins the company. Who, he's good looking, but he's not exceptionally bright, but he has charisma and he's he has a camera friendly face, but it's just so good, and it's just made me sort of appreciate how good movies used to be back then. I mean, it's been a while since I've watched a very good modern movie. Maybe Michael Owen hasn't really missed out on much.
What's great about 80s films in the whole, or certainly the successful ones, is they were fairly unfiltered and not necessarily made by committee, because I think I tend to, because these movies are so expensive to make now that everyone has input. There's so much riding on it financially that there are so many notes, and we're told, you've got to change this ending, this character can't be this, we have to have an explosion every so many pages of the script, and it just gets diluted, and what you end up with is something not worth your time half the time. Is there anything else we want to touch on before we get back to our afternoon?
Well, I mean, it's been a really nice weekend now that the bloody weather has finally improved and stopped being English. And I'm just hoping that, next month, June 21st, we will be able to open up everything again and get rid of these ridiculous rules and go back to some sort of normality. I mean, I've been enjoying eating out pretty much every week. I don't know about you, but I've been making up for lost time.
I could do with not eating, to be honest. Could do.
Is that why you're eating your cheap hummus?
Cheap hummus. Been going for runs. There's something.
Exercise doesn't actually make you lose weight.
No,
really.
But I often find that if I do exercise, it motivates me to eat better.
Okay, fair enough.
So that 90% of weight is certainly your diet. Exercise just complements it. But I like food, Iram. What can I say?
I like food too, but I'm not fat shit.
I've got 13 pounds to lose before I'm released back into the wild.
Oh, okay. So you're timing all this for when we're finally out of.
When is it? June 21st.
June 21st.
I'm never getting 13 pounds off in June 21st unless I chop a leg off or something.
Well, you've got a month to. So let's say if you lose £2 a week.
So that's £8.
That's £8, which isn't too bad. At least it's half a stone, and I think that is manageable.
All right, I'll check in. We'll check in.
You're not going to do it, are you?
Next, probably not.
I think anyone still listening, I think you should hound.
Yeah, fat shame me.
See,
and that might motivate me.
Fat shame Stephen and get him to lose that extra bit of lard he's carrying around him.
That's fair. I'll take the hit. All right, Iram, it's been an absolute pleasure as usual.
It always is, darling.
Thank you for listening to the Godless Spellchecker podcast. The podcast is a one-man operation, produced in my spare time away from my day job, and I love making it for you. If you enjoy what you hear, please consider lending some support. The show is entirely listener-supported. I don't sell anything, I don't run ads, and given the alternative and unpopular focus of my content, it's very unlikely to find a sponsor. So there are a number of ways you can support and chip in and help improve the show and give me more time to produce more content. You can become a patron supporter and pledge a monetary amount per month or per episode by visiting patreon.com/gspellchecker. If you can't lend monetary support right now, don't worry, there's other ways you can help the podcast too. You can share it on your various social media networks, or take a moment to leave a review wherever you listen to it. Your support is massively appreciated. Thank you. Think we've all learned something here today?